Welcome everybody. We're just going to give a minute for folks to join us. People are still filtering in, so we'll just give a few more seconds. Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar discussion on Palestine. And we'll be discussing the proposed Israeli annexation plan, COVID-19, and how Palestinians continue to resist the Israeli occupations and these new policies. My name is Alicia Rinkowska, and I'm the Development Coordinator at Christian Peacemaker Teams. I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So for security reasons, our Palestinian speaker today will not be using their camera and will be using a different name. We will be dedicating time at the end of the webinar to questions. So if you do have a question and you'd like to ask it, I ask that you put that in the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. And that way, even if we don't get to it in this actual webinar, we'll be able to answer it afterwards. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I just want to give a brief overview of CPT for those of you who don't know us. So CPT is an organization that trains everyday people to work in local peacemaking communities that are confronting situations of lethal conflict, partnering with them to transform violence and oppression. So our Palestinian speaker today, Mohammed, is a long-time observer of the Palestinian struggle on the ground and will be providing an analysis of the current situation. He'll be joined by our CPT Palestine team member, Julian. And I'd like to welcome you both to this webinar and thank you for being here. I'm going to hand over to Julian now to share about CPT Palestine, and he will then hand over to Mohammed. Thank you, Julian.
Good afternoon, everybody. So as Alicia mentioned, my name is Julian, and I am a full-time member of CPT Palestine. I'm currently in Amman, Jordan, waiting for the borders to reopen. If you're not familiar, CPT Palestine is based in Hebron, but our work extends into the South Hebron Hills. CPT Palestine started in 1995 after the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre, when a settler entered a mosque and killed over 20 Palestinians and injured 200 more. Despite this, more measures were taken against Palestinians, including restriction of movement and land confiscation. So our main function in CPT Palestine is working with the community and our partners and fostering relationships that work against the occupation and the massive oppression and human rights violations and abuses that occur from it. In short, our work includes accompaniment of school children who face daily human rights violation, monitoring of restriction of movement, settler violence, demolitions, settler tour, things of that nature. We also do a lot of documentation where we take these things and we publish reports that we share with our other clusters. And we also do advocacy where we share these on our platforms, social media platforms, do webinars like these, and so on and so forth. We also support any nonviolent demonstrations, and really we just work on whatever the community asks us to do. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that we do have action that Alicia will drop in the chat. We all really need to take action on this, and we need to demand to our government to take action against the annexation and reverse the US stance on recognizing settlements as being legal. So Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. So to the first question, there are so many issues facing the Palestinian people living under Israeli occupation, and the situation has become more dire with the current global pandemic. Can you please talk a little bit about what you are seeing in Palestine related to COVID-19? What's the current situation and how this has affected occupation and the Palestinian community?
Thanks, Julian. It is definitely a pleasure to be here this evening, and I do thank everybody who took their time to actually join us in this webinar. Yes, I think you are correct in saying that there's a lot on the minds of the Palestinians these days when it comes down to the pandemic, the annexation, and a whole different other issues. But it seems that the pandemic right now is the one that is dominating the Palestinian, like man of the street, let's say, is only thinking about not only the pandemic itself, but mostly the effects of the pandemic. Unfortunately, I live here in the city of Hebron, and right now Hebron has been like the biggest place where we have the highest number of COVID-19 related injury, people who actually been tested positive for it. We have probably about 1,930 cases, which is by far the highest in the West Bank. So that is from the perspective of public health, but at the same time, the side effects of the pandemic is bearing a big burden on the Palestinians, I would say, in Hebron and in general, because it came up at the time where the salaries of the workers have not actually been paid for the past couple of months, and so far we don't know when the salaries are going to be paid, and that's largely because Israel have actually put up a number of conditions on the money that is going to be transferred. That on monthly basis they transfer more like $140 million from our money, from the Palestinian money, to the Palestinian Authority. But I would say for the past, since like January, we've been having a big fluctuation in that. Because first of all, they decided that they're going to take out the budget for the prisoners and the martyrs, and of course the Palestinian Authority did not accept to take that money minus the budget for the prisoners. So there was a stop there. And then when the pandemic hit and we ended up with this issue of the annexation, and the Palestinian Authority decided to cut all ties between the authority and the Israelis. The Israelis came back and says, okay, we can give you the $140 million, but on the condition that you resume the coordination between the Palestinian Authority and the Israelis. And of course, the Palestinian Authority did not accept that because it was conditioned money. And ever since then, for the past, as I said, couple of months, we did not get any money for the salaries of the the PA employees. And that does cause a lot of stagnation in the economy itself. So the people on the ground, the regular man of the street, saying that we went into lockdown, we are taking all of the precautions that the government is talking about, even though a large number of them, unfortunately, like what happens in the States, they're still thinking about it from the perspective that this is a conspiracy, that this whole thing is a hoax, and they've done all of this so that they can do the annexation, or that they can divide the Ibrahimi Mosque, or that the settlers will take over whatever they want. This kind of a theory of conspiracy is very, very rampant, unfortunately. And that's what led to that huge increase in the number of people who tested positive. Because we had like a first wave until Eid, after Ramadan. People stayed in their houses, they locked themselves down. But they were talking about that Ramadan is the season for people to go and visit, for the merchants or the business people to actually, this is the seasons for them to buy and sell, having to actually have this issue of social distancing and people not mingling with each other and what have you, went up to a point until Eid. At Eid, everybody basically, they rose, to be honest, quote unquote, they rose against the Palestinian Authority and told them, this is Eid, and because it's Eid, we're gonna have to celebrate or to go to the market and what have you. So the Palestinian Authority at that point told them, okay, fine, you can actually go ahead and celebrate, but please keep in mind social distancing. Keep in mind that we do not have that, that the virus is not over, that you need to be able to wear the mask and the gloves and what have you. My understanding is that in general, in the entire West Bank, what the Palestinians heard was only that you can celebrate. They did not take into consideration the other precautions that they're supposed to be having. So with that, you end up with weddings, you ended up with celebrations for the Tawjihi. People are actually really going off the limb. So with that, we ended up actually contracting that virus in such a large number. And now the Palestinian Authority is seriously looking into curfews. They're seriously looking into have lockdowns for maybe an extended period of time until they can control back the issue of COVID. Again, the resistance is usually from business people who want to actually to make sure that their businesses are ongoing, that they can trade and then they can go back and forth, so that they, the economy will work. But with the issue of the lack of salaries, that's also bearing on the economy. That for the last 3 or 4 days, the shops are open, but because the employees do not have salaries that they're being paid, nobody's going to the markets. And it's like, it's a situation that I think it can explode anytime. So the PA is trying as much as possible to play with this issue, to kind of a balance between the public health, which is very much needed for everybody, versus the kind of the fragile economy that we already have to begin with. It's a fragile economy. Now that you don't have salaries and you don't have any kind of a perspective for this coordination between the Israelis and the Palestinians is going to go back into course. We're facing really, really major problems.
Thank you so much for those comments, Mohammed. These are very trying times for the Palestinian people. I want to pivot now maybe to more pressing news. There has been in everybody's minds, the Annexation Plan that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has announced, which will, in theory, go into effect tomorrow. Can you explain for us what annexation is and how will it impact Palestinian communities?
Yes, sir. The annexation has been on the minds of the politicians, the Palestinian Authority. But again, as I said earlier, you go to the man of the street these days and you talk about annexation, especially the people who are in the Jordan Valley, they probably will look at you funny and they say, well, I thought that happened a long time ago. Which is actually, it is a fact. The kind of the de facto annexation, specifically when you're talking about the Jordan Valley, has, we've seen it, on the ground day in and day out. But now it is being, looked at as a de jure annexation. This is what they're looking for. So since the very beginning, they were talking about the annexation of the Jordan Valley, and that was actually part of the deal of the century, as Trump has named it, in which I don't know if you can, Alicia, just put up the map of the deal of the century, please. In which that basically it being accepted by the White House and Benjamin Netanyahu, which is very weird. It's like an agreement between the Americans and the Israelis without any kind of a consultation with the Palestinians. Not that one, actually, it's the first one, please. That one. So basically, this is what you actually see in front of you. The deal of the century was that about 70% of the West Bank is going, which you can see it in green, as well as with with Gaza, that is going to be the future Palestinian state. Of course, in case that the Palestinian I'm back, right? So the Palestinian state, as
Yep, you're
it
back.
actually looks, yeah, as it looks in this deal of the century, it was not a given. There has to be a number of conditions that the Palestinians have to be meeting. No armed militia, the total control on the border is going to be for the Israelis. No control over natural resources. It's just those small little patches. And if the Palestinians accept these conditions, then we will declare it to be as a Palestinian state. Well, at this time, the Israelis have got what they wanted. They got Jerusalem. They got on the top of that the Golan Heights, and the right to actually to annex a number of pieces within the West Bank. And this is where initially they were talking about the possibility of annexing, and the conversation ended up being developed, and this is what Bibi Netanyahu actually promised during his election for the fourth or fifth time, I do believe, third time, that he is going to be annexing the Jordan Valley. So if you put the other map, please, Alicia, as things develop, this is what the Jordan Valley, this is where the annexation was supposed to be taking place. You can see the Jordan Valley all the way from the top of the east of the West Bank all the way down to Hebron, surrounding, of course, Jericho. That was what was put on the ground. This is the basis where a lot of discussion has been taking place between the Israelis and the White House, that these are the areas that we want to annex, or as they call them, to apply sovereignty on that, about 30% of the West Bank, and that would have been actually having a devastating effect on the Palestinians who are living in that area, first of all, because that's going to limit their access. That's probably they're going to be facing displacement. Even their identity, because Bibi Netanyahu actually said that we are not going to grant citizenship or any additional rights to the Palestinians who are living in that area. And our fear was that you're talking about most of the communities that are located in that area has already been facing forced displacement. You're talking about al-Khalil Ahmar, for example, which actually had a high court decision to evict it, and now if the annexation takes place, it's going to be much easier for them to go and kick them out. Other al-Hadidiyya, al-Farsiyya always have seen a number of demolitions throughout the years in an Israeli controlled area that's going to be so much easier to actually to displace those communities. Now, as things starting to actually to head towards the 1st of July, which is actually tomorrow, more and more cracks in the wall have been seen between the Israelis and the Americans. Some people said that it was a precondition in order for the annexation to take place, that to have an agreement between the Israeli, there's going to be a team of Israelis and Americans that are going to go and put up the map. They're going to figure out where the annexation is going to take place, what is going to be the border, which communities are going to be in, which communities are going to be out. But that meeting did not take place at all. Because of COVID, because of the possibility, I mean, they related that to it, that because of COVID, we could not bring people from the States to actually to discuss things with the Israelis, and that did delay the technicalities of the whole thing and did delay the discussion about it. But I think more practically is that the cracks have started to be between Friedman, the U.S. ambassador to Israel. He's a very, very staunch Zionist, looking for Judea and Samaria and complete annexation or what have you, and Jared Kushner, who had he did not actually visit the area since the signing of the deal of the century. He did not visit. He did not give an okay. He was not up to date. He was not looking into having to apply the annexation. because he was always, as the same case with Trump, they wanted to actually to sell this as part of the deal of the century. Now, the opposition for that position actually came in from Yisha Council, from the settlers. The settlers themselves, they were at the very beginning very happy about, having to apply sovereignty, because this is our God-given rights, and it is actually a step that was supposed to be taken a while back. We delayed it because there was not, the political atmosphere was not okay. Now with Trump being in office, and he's so, gave us Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, and he is so staunchly with Israel, and gave us this deal of the century. However, us as the Yisha Council, we do not want to see that annexation as a price or as part of the Trump deal, because by definition they are against any kind of establishment of a Palestinian state. So if we are going to do the annexation, and in return you're thinking that the rest is going to go to the Palestinian state, then we don't want that. That's where the most of the opposition is taking place, is that it should not be as a price that is going to be paid for a Palestinian state. Even for 70% of the West Bank, we don't want a Palestinian state that's going to be in the midst of it, because this is entirely Judea and Samaria, that's entirely ours. And with that, the Palestinians should just give up and say, this is reality on the ground, and give up all of their political and economic and social rights. So the opposition came up from the settlement, from the settlers. At the same time, Kushner and his team were saying that no, we are not going to allow the annexation to take place just because Bibi Netanyahu actually promised that during the elections. There has to be a price to be paid, and we have to negotiate the price right now before actually taking that step. So that's one. The second thing is that the Americans are looking at it broadly, that Netanyahu, when he was talking to his base about the annexation of the Jordan Valley, and as a first step for the entire Judea and Samaria, blah, blah, he was talking to his base. The Americans have the interest of the entire Middle East at this point. They're thinking about United Arab Emirates and what is going to be their stance, the instability that might take place in Jordan if that happens. Yes, the Saudis, from between closed doors, are saying, okay, fine, we'll accept this, and then we're going to move forward, and the Emiratis, and of course Egypt. But at the same time, they're seeing that step as the annexation, it's a very premature step that might jeopardize the ongoing relationship between Israel and other Arab countries. And you've seen that in the article that was written by the Emirati foreign minister in Ma'arif, not in New York Times, in Ma'arif, in which he actually spoke directly to the Israeli public, and basically saying that we thought that Israel is a friend of ours and we want to integrate Israel in the Middle East. But if you're going to take that step, then that is going to put us in a very deep crisis with our people. We cannot go forward with this. And I think that actually did bear fruit, because currently you end up seeing that actually there is some sort of a retreat from the 1st of July. Gantz as well said that it's not a holy day, that it's not set in stone that we are going to declare annexation on that day. Gantz also said that we are not with the annexation, but if it's going to take place, we're not going to actually to be able to stop it. Netanyahu actually kind of echoed this issue that this is not a sacred day, it's not set on stone that we are going to annex on the 1st of July. Also, now there's been shifting argument regarding that it's probably we're not going to take that 30% all at once. This is a big chunk. So maybe because you end up with the EU also was not united against this opposition, maybe they voiced out some sort of opposition to the annexation, but inside, when it comes down to the Czech Republic and to Greece and Austria, they were always against anything to be done against Israel. So even the EU was not capable of actually putting any kind of limitations on this. But having to look at the bigger picture, now they're saying that it's not a sacred day. It's not going to be set in stone. The second thing is that they're looking for partial annexation, which now they're talking about that the Palestinians in the past have accepted the issue of land swap, so that they've accepted that, that big settlement blocks like Gush Asyon, for example, is not going to be vacated. It's going to stay and annexed to Israel within any kind of a possible, peace process. The Palestinians have accepted that. So maybe that the Israelis, if they're going to do for annexation, they're going to actually to do partial annexation in areas that are very close to Jerusalem, for example. Areas that, it is a de facto that down the road, that's going to be a part of Israel. Gush Asyon area, for example, we have about 75, about 7,000 settlers that are actually living in that area. It is within any kind of a real politique, you're going to be thinking that that part is going to go into Israel because they're going to evacuate 75,000 settlers for the sake of the Palestinians. Some other people said Ma'ali Udumim also is a big settlement in the east of East Jerusalem, and if that is going to be annexed into Israel, it's actually going to put a very big wedge in the possibility of the Palestinians have a united, at least geographically, united state, because it comes in right in the middle, cuts everything in half. So they are looking at other possibilities. They're looking at the issue of partial annexation versus, the annexation of 30% of the West Bank all at once. So it's still ongoing. The Palestinian Authority have said it clearly that partial or full annexation, that is not going to be accepted. We are against the issue of annexation per se. They've been trying to drum a lot of support on the international level. The IE came out against the annexation. The United Nations came out against the annexation. So there has been some sort of momentum that is probably going to lead Israel to, or Bibi, to change his mind about the extent of the annexation. Maybe not the concept of annexation, but the extent. And we're already seeing right now, even Gantz, there's a lot of reports saying that probably the coalition is not going to last for any longer. And actually that some people went as far as saying that this is exactly what Bibi Netanyahu wants, because now he can go out to another election saying that, okay, we tried to work with the left, we tried to actually to impose sovereignty on Judea and Samaria, but look at this, the left does not want it, and this is why, I tried my best, and they don't want, they are the ones who failed me into this issue, specifically that it was a condition for the coalition that both would accept the issue of annexation. Now he can easily blame Gantz for that and say, because of him, I did not do the annexation, go for another election, and then that way we can see that the left is the one who betrayed, quote unquote, the Zionist dream, and for the next election they're going to be, the left is going to be out, and then Bibi Netanyahu will have a good majority that he can, claim that he can actually go for sovereignty. That means that the issue of sovereignty can be delayed for that much more, and that gives it much more possibility for discussions and agreements between him, the Americans, and of course the Arab countries, so that that deal will go through. So there is a lot of back and forth of this issue, and we don't think that tomorrow is going to come up and say, okay, annexation has taken place.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for all of that. This is just absolutely appalling news and goes against international law. I just would like to remind folks that we do have a petition in the chat for us to take action for the U.S. government to not recognize or stop annexation, and also to reverse the U.S. position of recognizing settlements as being legal. So please sign that petition. We highly encourage it and share it on all platforms. Lastly, Mohammed, I wanted to ask about what is the Palestinian response, and what other things are being done in the West Bank and amongst the Palestinian community?
Well, as I said, the issue when it comes down to annexation, it's more the Palestinian Authority, or what you can easily say that the political elite that have been actually doing a number of activities, despite the fact that we have COVID-19, going around or what have you. But you already have like 3 big gatherings that took place, one in Jericho, one in Jifret, the other one is in Bardala. And I do think that maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow there's another big one in Ramallah, where you have a large number of the Palestinians, specifically when it comes down to Fatah or PLO factions, will get together, wave the flags, say that they're supporting the president, all the kind of the same old methods that have been used by the Palestinian Authority in order for them to show that it's not only the politicians or the leaders of the Palestinian Authority who are against the annexation, but it's also the people who are behind such a decision. And to be honest, I don't think that is the case. People, as I said earlier, they are a little bit more into these days, how am I supposed to be going to work? Because a lot of the people who have been locked down during the COVID issue are the ones that, if you work today, you eat. If you don't work today, you don't eat. So they are more interested in having to provide food for their families. The other layer will be the employee. And again, the employees have not been paid for the past 2 months. So they're a little bit more into how are they going to be able to pay for the mortgage, or how are they going to be able to pay for the loan with all of these, and there's no income coming in. So that's where, for the most part, so probably about 85–90% of the Palestinian people are actually within that realm. While the other 10, the political elite, the thinkers, are actually seeing the damage that the annexation would have on the Palestinian population. So the Palestinian Authority is using the same old methods, having to talk with the foreign ministers of the Arab League, the foreign ministers of the Islamic League, trying to actually go to the UN, despite the fact that most of the people in the UN are actually with international law. But again, with the UN and this new administration, with this administration, US administration, it's a fertile exercise. They're not going to get anything out of that. And I do believe that the Israelis know this, and this is why they're continuing to have that kind of a dialogue, ongoing dialogue with the American administration, because the Israelis want to actually finish this as soon as possible. Maybe about a couple of months ago, they were saying, they were a little bit more confident than that Trump is going to be re-elected in 2020, especially in light of Joe Biden, weak stance, let's say. But now, after the Black Lives Matters and the pandemic and the crashing of the economy, the Democrats believe that they probably have a shot, or at least a better shot, at having to replace Trump. So the Israelis want to actually to get most of what they want before Trump actually leaves office, if he does leave office. So they are, moving along with that. But the Palestinians are using the same old methods, the same old, methods on the international level. At the same time, trying to actually to push their base. I would say the base has been shrinking, for a while now, in the West Bank as to be loyal to the Palestinian Authority and the steps. Having said that, also, you have this still issue of Gaza. Gaza is also, we've had some demonstrations going out against the annexation and, with the president. But also Hamas came out and said that we're not going to talk too much about this annexation. Just know that if it's going to happen, the Israelis going to have to pay a price. That's it. That's exactly what he said. So we are going. The issue might end up actually escalate if it was not thoroughly thought of, and it will be the best thing is that if it doesn't happen. Now, having said that, also there was a webinar that took place yesterday actually with Haaretz, in which that the Haaretz correspondent, the Palestinian one, actually said, don't be fooled that, if it doesn't happen or it happened only partially, that, we won as an international community. If July 1st goes without annexation, the current situation is not that good. We still have occupation, we still have settlements, we still have settler violence, we still have incursions by the army, we still have that the Israelis are the one who are controlling the economy, the Palestinian economy. We still have no coordination with the Israelis. Things are bad. And, the annexation would have been just taking advantage of these already bad situation and implement a step that, as I said earlier, is a de facto. Is we already have an annexation in, especially in the Jordan Valley or some other areas. It's there. So not having, if the Israelis, and I think that's what's going to happen, if they're going to retract a little bit and they said, okay, fine, we're not going to do the annexation, that does not mean that, everything is fine. That does not mean that, all of the troubles have evaporated. The occupation is still there, that all of the kind of the circumstances that would have led to the annexation are still there. The Palestinians are still suffering. The Palestinian Authority is being targeted specifically so that they can change their minds about the deal of the century, about the coordination and what have you. So things, even as they stand, are bad. If the annexation takes place, then its ramification down the road will be extremely bad for the Palestinians.
Thank you, Mohammed. We're going to move now to questions and answers. And I've got quite a few questions here, so we're going to try our best to get through as many as possible. Quite a few people have asked, and this will be from Mohammed, have asked about, during the time of COVID-19, have human rights violations increased, including like home demolitions? Have we seen an increase during this time of COVID-19?
For sure. I mean, we're documenting this on daily basis. You see, to this morning, for example, the Israeli settlers took over a hill overlooking the town of Halhul. That was today. A couple of weeks ago, they went out of Havot Ma'un and they've taken over another hill close to the village of Twani, in Borin and Arif. You name it. Last week, they themselves have actually prevented people from building a house and set a number of fields on fire. In the old city of Hebron, they're continuing to build at the Zatari house, and the violence the physical violence against the Palestinians there is very, very rampant. So yes, you've seen definitely an increase in that. At the same time, demolitions, if you go back to OCHA, have actually, the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, only about 4 or 5 days ago, put up a leaflet specifically talking about that the increase of demolition that took place in May of this year have surpassed any demolitions that has taken place since 2009. In May, all of the Mays since 2009, so a marked increase in demolitions and stop work orders. In Bahrain, they've given. Today they went to Twani and give stop work orders. In Iraqis, in Masafir Yatta, you know, you name it. And of course, around Jerusalem, the demolitions are on daily basis are taking place. So we did not see that just because of COVID that there was some reduction in those practices, you know, fearing health measures or whatever. Actually, it did maybe more than double in these areas. So this is another whammy on the Palestinians.
Thank you, Mohammed. We've got a couple of questions regarding the US election and what this could mean for Palestine. What could happen if Trump is elected or if Biden is elected? Back to you.
Well, if Trump is elected, it's a bad news for the world, not only for the Palestinians. Be it internally, externally, you know, inside of the states. I think that this is going to be another 4 years in which that the world is going to be in a total turmoil. Be it inside of, you know, as a civil rights in the United States, or is it going to be on the international level with this quote unquote leader that basically is wishy-washy. You know, sometimes he starts with North Korea and then he stops, and then he threatens Iran and then he stops, and then he's milking the Saudi Arabia and then he stops. So with that unpredictability, this is not and unpredictability and no respect for international law whatsoever. I think that we are going to be heading into a very dark tunnel if that's going to take place. However, at the same time, if you're talking about Biden being elected, that's going to be a tough battle, to be honest. You know, he already have said that he's not, for example, he's not going to cancel the issue of the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem. He failed to actually to come out with statements specifically talking about the Palestinians and the Palestinian rights, and you know, that they have to be part of the conversation. I know if Bernie was still there, and then I know that Bernie has signed something with OIC talking about you know, the rights of the Palestinian. There's been a very good step in the Senate with Democrats in the Senate, you know, for canceling the annexation, and there was another one by the Republican for the annexation. So there's probably going to be a little bit better. We're not saying a major shift in the policies, but to be honest, the disappointment that we had from Barack Obama, that at the very beginning when he was elected, I was very happy about that, and for a couple of reasons. I've been to the States. I stayed there for about 8 years. And when he was elected, we thought that, okay, finally the Americans have actually lived up to their momentum or their ideals. And now here you go, they're electing a black president, and that should come up with some sort of a, you know, rights for all and all of that. And his speech in Cairo was a very refreshing start for his presidency. But I have to say that actually the Palestinians were very disappointed that he did not actually manage within 8 years to push the issues that we wanted. Maybe, you know, the only thing that I can remember about him was in Christmas 2000, right before he departed, they did not veto the UN resolution that talked about the settlements. So Biden is not going to be better. Biden is not going to be better. I think he's going to be a little bit weaker. You know, it's going to be a little bit better, but not that much.
Thank you, Mohammed. We have a question here about this time of COVID-19 has brought a lot of things online, including a lot of people using Zoom and online platforms. How has this impacted the Palestinian strategy on the ground?
Regarding the annexation or regarding the health crisis?
I think in general, the Palestinian resistance and also include the health crisis.
Yeah, in a number of places, when it comes down to actually the settlers moving in, I know specifically example of Twane. People actually were ready for them. They were not. They did not say that COVID have prevented them from going out and kind of try to stop settlers from taking more land and what have you. But to be honest, when the new government was formed under Dr. Shteye, there was some hope that the main issue would have been national unity. The issue will be that we are going to wage the war of peace, quote unquote. That's through diplomacy, through the UN, through that we are going to stop the Israelis and the deal of the century. That was the big thing that was taking place. However, when COVID took place, that actually did take shifting of the attention, not because we want to, but because we have to, from the political arena into the health arena, that also have shifted the issue of resources. The money that at least now the Prime Minister is always thinking about where are we going to get the salaries from. While if it was no COVID, we already have at least some sort of a flexibility in which that we can assure that salaries will be gone on time. So having to actually to shift these resources to deal with the COVID issue has taken a lot of our time, have taken a lot of the financial resources the Palestinian Authority has in order for them to face that. So definitely somebody was always talking about right now we are seeing two COVIDs, the corona of the actual corona and the corona of the occupation. And this is where a lot of people are talking about, the conspiracy theory that this is not coincidental.
Thank you, Mohammed. We're getting quite a lot of questions for you regarding what brings you hope during this time, and we'd love to hear more from you on that.
Okay, I think that there are two levels for this. Given the fact that we are in the field, we are always knowing what is taking place, so we know kind of the big picture. The big picture is very, very gloomy. The big picture is very, very dark. And if we're thinking about the future generations and what is it going to be their future, it's not a bright future for sure. I mean, talking about politically that you do not have a state, and even if you have that 70% state that you do not have any kind of a control over resources, over border, over water, over space, over sea, you cannot imagine what kind of a future that these guys will have. However, for my part, having to know the big picture is very good for me because I can look further down the road. But I've come myself to the realization that, or to the acceptance that there are things that I can change and there are things that I cannot change. So rather than actually having to look at the things that I cannot change and then start to beat my head against the wall because I cannot change it, or basically give up and say, hey, I can't do anything about that, I usually work on daily basis, and I know a number of you from the participants know exactly what I'm talking about, that we have a very small organization that on daily basis we are concentrating on the micro level, on things that we can do. So yeah, we are engaged in building schools. We are engaged in sending people who are living next to settlements to go to college. We're sponsoring people to have master's degree at this point in time. A lot of women from the Bedouin areas in which that we're working in, we are paying for their tuition to go to college. We've already built about 5 schools, 2 kindergartens. We're paying for school transportations. We're digging systems because we want to work on that micro level, that I can give hope for these kids to go to school. I can give hope for these youngsters that are about to graduate to see what the world is all about, a decent chance in having to face the world. I can provide for a family of 20 people who are living without a water access, I can provide them with water. So all of these things that we can do, I think we're doing magnificent work in terms of trying to get them what they need on a daily basis. So hopefully that will give them some hope that maybe tomorrow is going to be a better place for us. But again, we're not kidding ourselves by not looking at the big picture. We are looking at the big picture. We know the big picture, but we try to actually to plant the seed for smaller things. Hopefully that that is going to give them a better chance down the road. And if it doesn't happen, at least I can say that I've done my best, and this is what I could have done.
Thank you, Mohammed. And just a couple of folks have asked about what you would like to see, and you mentioned a little bit about that in your last answer, but would you want to see a one democratic state solution?
Well, that's not going to happen. The Israeli public and the Israeli policy, and ever since it started within the West Bank, is that it is the Jewishness of the state, in which that they probably would need to have the largest number or the largest area possible to be annexed or to be occupied with the least amount of the Palestinians. Now, why am I saying that the one-state solution that is not going to be a possibility? Is that because, as I said, the main issue right now is actually to have a few quote unquote, or let's say the Jewishness of the state, which means that if Israel is going to annex 30% of the entire West Bank or whatever, they are already having problems with the Palestinians who are living within the 48 borders. Those people who are about, I think they're probably about, I don't know, about maybe 3 or 4 million of them, about 20% of the Israeli population, and they already, the Israelis are trying to actually to kind of implement the nationality law, for example, the loyalty law that you're supposed to be loyal to the state of Israel. And basically, even when they were talking about having to have land swaps with the Palestinians, they were thinking about, like in the north, an MFM, which is a big kind of a concentration of Israeli Arabs, like they call them, that they wanted to give that back to the Palestinian state. So they want to get rid of as many number of Palestinians as possible so that they can have more of the Jewishness of the state. Now, if they're going to go for a one-state solution, that means that they're going to actually to add to that mix another 3 million Palestinians who are living in the West Bank. No, actually 4 million Palestinians who are living in the West Bank, and then you have another 2.8 million in Gaza. Putting that into the mix, and that is going to kill the Jewishness of the state. That's one. The second thing is that if they put us there, if they annex us, they have two possibilities. Either that they are going to actually to give us full rights, as we are citizens of the state, and everybody has one man, one vote. Give us about 10 years, if not less, and then we can actually vote Israel out of existence, because there's so many of us. And alhamdulillah, I believe that we are educated enough that we know our social political rights, and we know how to run for for the Knesset and all of these things. So legally, by using these methods, we can actually vote Israel out of existence. That's if we are given the rights. Now, if we are not going to be given the rights, then you're talking about one state that has two sets of law, one for the Israelis, for the Jews basically, and one for the Palestinians, and that spells out apartheid, and that's what Israel does not actually want to have. So the kind of the annexation or the one-state solution, even though a lot of people are, especially in light of the annexation, are becoming more and more vocal towards having to go for the one-state solution, I don't think that anybody or I'll say small minority in the Israeli street that actually is going to accept that.
Thank you for that answer, Mohammed. And we've got about 6 minutes left here, and I just want to ask, and this can be for yourself and also Julian, what can folks do from their home communities, whether that be anywhere in the world? Like, what can we be doing to support the Palestinian resistance?
Well, there are, it comes down to the annexation as what you're doing right now. There is this petition is going around, about having to actually to raise understanding about and maybe objections to the annexation. I know that the EAPPI is actually doing a campaign about no to annexation, and that is actually doing very good on Facebook. So that kind of a public awareness is definitely is very important. At the same time, we definitely have to push the politicians to know that that this is not going to be okay. And I think that there is some sort of a dependency from the Palestinian people on the international audience to do that. Because to be honest, we're not going to be able to depend on Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates or Egypt, for example, actually to carry out our voice in that. You're talking about dictatorships that the voice of the people is not heard down there. So I think that is going to be up on the international audiences to actually try to convince their members of the parliament or the members of the European Parliament or even in the Congress that this is not going to be okay, that this is actually against international law and it should be treated as a war crime. At the same time, which I think my most preferred action, again, we're not belittling any other action, the whole thing should take place, is that for me, and this is maybe the philosophy that my organization is working on, is actually we are trying to work with the most vulnerable, with the person who is living in a tent next to the settlement. Because for him, if the Democrats actually ended up signing a petition against the annexation and give it to Trump, or that they're going to go to Brussels to say something about it, that doesn't matter for him. What he matters actually for him, he needs to be able to, in that location, he needs to be able to be supported, that his steadfastness is supposed to be supported. So by the time that there's going to be a negotiation, that you will have Palestinians to negotiate on. The idea for the Israelis in Area C, especially when it comes down to areas that are very close to settlements, is that put maximum pressure on them in terms of house demolitions, movement restrictions, harassment by the settlers. Put that much pressure, that kind of a coercive environment that we are talking about, put that pressure on them that they will leave. So down the road, if there's going to be negotiations, when they come in and say, okay, we want that population, and say, okay, which population are we talking about? There's nobody there. So for me, as a front line, that guy who's living in a tent is supposed to be supported. Be it that he wants to have an additional tent, be it that he wants to have a water system, be it that he wants to have to plow his land, or that he wants to get his kid to go to college. That is essential for them. And again, this is something that I can do, that micro interventions, something that I can do, and I think is becoming very, very fruitful, while depending on the same time on the international level that others are actually carrying out the message to the decision makers in Brussels or some other places.
Yeah, I would just echo everything Mohammed said. The one thing I would definitely say is that we listen to our Palestinian brothers and sisters and use our platforms to amplify their voices in whatever way that we can. And as Mohammed was saying, that we need to put maximum pressure on our governments, our congressmen and congresswomen at home, or if in the UK, the parliament. But, talking to our congressmen and congresswomen is really, really important. It's a way of being active in our communities back home and amplifying the voices of our Palestinian brothers and sisters, because it's very important. Like, for example, this petition will be sent to members of the Senate on Foreign Relations, and the more petitions that we gather, the better of a chance it has to be heard. And voting matters, the election that's coming up. So use our platforms to amplify voices and put pressure on our government. And lastly, I would say if you like updates on what's CPT Palestine is doing, you can follow us on our social media to hear what's going on as well. We have a newsletter as well that you can get other updates as well.
Thank you, Mohammed and Julian. We've got 1 minute left, and I just want to see if there are any final words you want to share with us, Mohammed.
Well, definitely, I'm very thankful for all of the people who actually participated in here today. It really does kind of provide us as Palestinians, some sort of a hope that the international community is actually listening to the agony that is taking place in this area. And I do sincerely thank the CPT team, both in Chicago and even on the ground, because we are really working very, very closely with them. I've known them to be a very honest, very dedicated group of people who are really seeing the injustices that are taking place and have decided to take a stand against that, despite of all of, as Western civilization, Western life can actually have so many different things that can take you away from doing, what is, what I wouldn't say what's right, but actually standing by international rights, let's say. So all due respect to the CPT, all due respect to the people who are joining us today, and we would love to host you here in Hebron. It's not that hard for us, once the borders are open, and with this issue of COVID-19 is rescinding, we will be more than happy to host you here in Hebron.
And I want to thank you so much, Mohammed, for being with us today, and to you, Julian, as well. It's wonderful to hear from you. I will just let other folks know that we will be sending an email out shortly with the recording of this webinar, with also some links, including the one to this petition that we've sent around in the chat box. We'll also try to include the maps. We've had a lot of requests for that, and also the social media links for the CPT Palestine team. So please look out for that in your inbox today. All right, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you again, Mohammed and Julian, for being here. And we look forward to having you at our future webinars. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you everybody. Looking forward to seeing you.